If you don't want to move into the retirement community, then pack your things and get out of my house." Those were the words my son-in-law Evan shouted, looking straight into my eyes. I stayed silent, managing only a faint smile. I folded my clothes carefully, tucked away the old photographs, and locked the hat box that held my vintage floral pieces. An hour later, a sleek black limousine stopped in front of Lakeview House, the home by Austin Lake. When my daughter Lydia opened the door and saw who had come to pick me up, the smile vanished from her face. It was as if the ground had fallen away beneath her feet. That feeling, when you look at the child you once cradled, once fed, once taught to recite poems, and realize you no longer recognize the person standing before you. That's exactly what I felt when Lydia, my daughter, threw me out of the house. No, more precisely, out of my own house. The house I bought with 32 years of teaching English at Austin High, grading essays and writing reports late into the night, every page paying for a single brick in these walls. But that Sunday afternoon in March, none of that mattered anymore. I was washing the dishes after lunch, as always, because according to Evan, my son-in-law, I seemed to belong in the kitchen. The front of my floral dress was damp, my calloused hands trembling slightly as I held the sponge. Lydia walked in, wearing that familiar frown I'd known since she was a little girl, being scolded by her father. But Robert, her father, had been gone for 13 years, and the 40-year-old woman standing in front of me was no longer that child. "Mom, we need to talk." I dried my hands on an embroidered kitchen towel a friend had given me long ago, turned around and smiled tiredly. "What is it, sweetheart?" Evan entered, polished watch, light blue shirt, voice even and businesslike. He crossed his arms and leaned against the doorway, as if waiting for a show to start. "We've decided," Lydia said, avoiding my eyes. "This house feels a bit cramped. The kids need more space, and you're getting older. Maybe it's time you found a place that fits you better." My heart thudded hard. I knew what was coming. "A place that fits me better," I repeated slowly. "You mean a retirement home?" "Mom, there are some really nice ones nearby," she began softly. "They have activities, friends, nurses to take care of you." "A retirement home?" I cut her off. The word shot out like a bullet. "You're trying to send me to a home?" The silence in the kitchen grew heavy. Evan pretended to scroll through his phone. Finally, Lydia looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before: coldness. "Not a nursing home, Mom," she said quickly. "An upscale assisted living community." "The only difference," I replied evenly, "is that you're trying to get rid of me." My voice didn't tremble. I wouldn't let them see it. Then Evan snapped, "Then go. If you don't want to move into a home, pack your bags and get out of my house." His shout echoed through the kitchen, bounced off the walls I had painted, through the hallway where Robert's photos hung, and up the staircase I had scrubbed every day for 3 years. Lydia tried to hide her discomfort behind her hand, but I saw it. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not my heart. It had shattered long ago. It was the final thread connecting me to the illusion that I still had a family. I took a deep breath, looked at the daughter I no longer recognized, and did the last thing they expected. I smiled. "All right, Lydia, I'll pack my things." Evan's face changed. Confusion mixed with fear. They had expected tears, pleading, a scene, but there was only a chilling calm. I walked upstairs to the small room at the back of the house where I slept, a space so tiny it looked like a storage closet. I took out the vintage hat box, the same one I'd brought with me 3 years ago when I moved in. I folded my clothes neatly. Every blouse, every dress, every scarf I used to wear when I taught literature. Then I took out a small wooden box filled with photographs. Robert and me on our wedding day. Lydia as a baby in my arms. My mother standing in the backyard of the house where I grew up. I didn't shed a single tear. An hour later, I carried the box downstairs. Evan sat on the sofa I had bought. Lydia beside him, her face tired, uncertain. When the doorbell rang, Evan rose with an annoyed sigh and opened the door, and the look on his face I'll never forget. A sleek black limousine waited outside. The driver, dressed in a dark suit, opened the rear door. And out stepped a man in his 70s, silver hair neatly combed, navy suit impeccable. It was Charles Bennett, Robert's former business partner and co-founder of Hollander and Bennett Developments, one of Austin's largest real estate firms. And he had come for me. Evan froze, mouth open. Lydia went pale. Charles walked straight toward me, as if they weren't even there. "Maggie," he said warmly, smiling. "Are you ready?" I picked up my hat box and gave Lydia one last look. "Thank you for everything, Lydia. The house is all yours now." I stepped outside. The smiles on their faces vanished completely. Through the back window of the limousine, I saw Lydia still standing motionless on the porch, watching her mother leave with quiet grace. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt free. Inside, the faint scent of genuine leather and expensive cologne filled the air. Charles Bennett sat beside me, keeping a respectful distance as the car glided down Austin's main boulevard. I held tightly to this handle of my vintage hat box as if it were the only real thing left. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a strange mix of relief and disbelief. "Maggie, are you all right?" Charles asked softly. I wanted to say, "I'm fine," to pretend I was in control, but what came out was a weary sigh. "I don't even know how I feel, Charles. Everything's so new." He nodded without speaking. We sat quietly, watching the city drift by, cars, billboards, people crossing the street, the world moving on as if my life hadn't just collapsed. When we reached Bennett Tower, a sleek glass skyscraper downtown, I needed Charles's arm to help me step out. The security guards bowed respectfully. He smiled back while I remained invisible to them, just a woman beside him. The mirrored elevator reflected a 67-year-old woman in a simple dress, gray hair neatly tied back, eyes swollen from holding back tears. "You still look beautiful, Maggie," Charles said gently, as if reading my thoughts. "You always have." I wanted to laugh, to tell him he was mistaken, but the sincerity in his eyes silenced me. His apartment was on the 23rd floor, a penthouse overlooking Lake Austin. When the doors opened, I stopped in awe. Marble floors, high ceilings, sunlight streaming through glass walls, elegant decor, yet warm. "Your room's upstairs," Charles said, carrying my hat box. "You've got your own bathroom, closet, and balcony. Make yourself at home. This is your house now." My house now. Those words echoed in my head as I climbed the polished wooden stairs. The bedroom was twice the size of the one I'd had at Lydia's. A king-size bed with crisp white sheets, golden light filtering through linen curtains. The air smelled fresh, like a new beginning. I sat on the edge of the bed, and the tears finally came. Not from sadness, but from exhaustion, from years of pain finally uncoiling inside me. I didn't know how long I cried. When I looked up, the city was glowing under the nightlights. My phone vibrated nonstop. Lydia was calling. I let it ring until it stopped. Then again. I declined. Notifications poured in. 47 missed calls, 23 messages. I opened them. "Mom, where are you? Please answer." "Who was that man? Can we talk?" "Mom, I'm worried." I laughed quietly. "Worried about me? After throwing me out of my own kitchen?" I turned the phone off. A soft knock came at the door. "Maggie, I made some tea," Charles said, stepping in with a silver tray, a teapot, and a few cookies. He sat by the window, pouring tea without a word. The scent of lavender and mint filled the room, my favorite blend. "How did you know?" I asked. "Robert told me," he said gently. "He said you always drank it before bed." The mention of Robert Hollander made my heart ache. Robert, the man I loved more than life itself, had died of a heart attack 13 years ago. "Why did you come for me today, Charles? How did you even know?" He paused. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Pure coincidence. I happened to drive by and saw your grandson playing in the yard. I thought of stopping to say hello, but something told me to come back later. When I saw you walking out with that hat box and the look on your daughter's face, I understood everything." "She threw me out," I said flatly. "My own daughter." Charles set his cup down, fingers intertwined. Maggie, there's something I need to tell you, but first, there's something I've kept to myself for many years." My heart began to race. His eyes carried both peace and sorrow. "I've always loved you," he said quietly. The silence that followed was so deep, I could hear my own breathing. "From the day Robert introduced you as his fiancée, you were 23, wearing that yellow dress with the tiny flowers. Your smile lit up the whole room." I didn't know what to say. My mind went blank. Charles's voice softened, steadier now. "Robert was my best friend, and you loved him. So I kept my feelings to myself, turned them into respect, into friendship. I married Laura, had children, built a life. But Maggie," Charles paused, his voice catching, "you've always been the only one in my heart." Tears came again. I didn't even know why. Maybe confusion. Or maybe because, for the first time in so long, someone truly saw me, not as a burden of a mother, but as a person with worth. "Laura passed away 5 years ago," he continued. "I honored her memory properly, waited until I could, but I never found the courage to look for you." Charles stood, stepped closer, and then knelt before me, a 73-year-old investor kneeling before a woman like me. "But today," he said softly, "when I saw you leaving that house with the grace of a queen, I knew I couldn't lose you again." "Charles, He gently stopped me. "You don't have to say anything. Just know this. You're not alone anymore. You'll never be alone again." He kissed my forehead, a promise in the form of a touch, then quietly left the room. I sat there staring at the glittering lights of Austin through the glass, holding a cup of tea gone cold. For the first time in decades, I felt truly seen. The next morning, Charles knocked on my door. "Put on something nice," he said with a mysterious smile. "We have an important appointment." "What kind of appointment?" "Trust me." An hour later, we arrived at his attorney's office, a sleek glass building downtown. His lawyer, Dr. Oliver Sampson, a bald man with glasses, shook my hand with unusual respect. "Mrs. Hollander, it's an honor to meet you." Charles pulled out a chair for me and sat beside me. "Go ahead, Oliver." The lawyer opened a turquoise folder, pulled out several documents, and looked directly at me. "Mrs. Hollander, Mr. Bennett has an offer for you. He wishes to grant you minority ownership shares in 3 of Hollander Bennett Development's projects. This would provide you with an estimated monthly income of around $100,000, depending on quarterly results." I blinked several times, stunned. "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" Charles smiled. "You'll never have to depend on anyone again. Not on me. Not on an ungrateful daughter. Not on anyone." In that moment, I understood. My life had changed completely. Lydia kept calling. 47 calls turned into 200. But I never answered, because some doors, once closed, should stay closed, at least for now. What Lydia didn't know was that the limousine that day wasn't the biggest surprise. Her real nightmare was only just beginning. The next morning, I woke up in Charles's penthouse. It felt strange, like waking up somewhere foreign, needing a few seconds to remember where I was. I opened my eyes to the high ceiling, the linen curtains swaying in the breeze. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. But I wasn't. I sat up slowly, my knees cracking. The price of age. I stepped out onto the balcony overlooking Lake Austin and gazed down at the city below. From up here, Austin looked entirely different. Cleaner, brighter, quieter. No longer the dull view from that cramped little room in Lydia's house, where all I could see was a gray wall and a rusty water tank. A cold wave washed over me. I had ignored too many things, overlooked too many signs, swallowed countless small cruelties, all to keep the peace. I sat on the white wooden swing chair on the sunlit balcony and let the memories flood back. 3 years earlier, I had sold my small 2-bedroom cottage in Wimberley, paid for with decades of teaching and tutoring after hours. Every square foot had been earned with sweat and chalk dust. Lydia had come one Saturday afternoon with Evan and that charming smile. "Mom, It must be lonely living alone. What if something happens? You're not getting any younger. Age. That word they used like a sentence. I'm fine, dear. I have friends, my own routines. Evan chimed in, sweet as syrup. Our house is big. The kids adore you. We'll take good care of you. Take care of me. It sounded comforting, but it was a lie wrapped in kindness. Lydia scratched her head, looking awkward, just like when she was a child. Actually, we're thinking of opening another interior design office, but we're short on capital. If you sold your cottage and invested with us, it would be like a family partnership. So I sold it. I sold that house for about $300,000 and handed everything to my daughter, believing I was investing in her future, in our family's future. 3 years passed, and I never saw a single penny back. The memories piled up, one loss after another. My grandmother Eleanor's jewelry disappeared. A pearl brooch, a gold ring with an amethyst, and an amber necklace. Not expensive, but priceless heirlooms, treasures she had carried when she fled Europe during the war. I had hidden them in a small green velvet box inside my dresser drawer. Then one day, the box was gone. Maybe you misplaced it, Mom, Lydia said, her eyes still glued to her phone. I didn't forget. I know exactly where I put it. Evan stood in the doorway, smirking. Mother-in-law, honestly, at your age, forgetting things is normal. My mom was the same, right before she moved into a senior community. Senior community. That phrase had been planted in my ears long ago. I never saw those jewels again. 6 months later, I saw a photo of Evan and Lydia vacationing in Palm Springs. Lydia wearing a bracelet identical to mine. When I asked her about it, she laughed. Oh, I bought it at a craft market in California. I didn't react. I didn't make a scene. I swallowed my tears and pretended to believe them, because I was afraid of losing my daughter, afraid of being alone, afraid to admit I had raised someone too weak to protect her own mother. But the worst memory came from a summer night 8 months ago. I went downstairs for a glass of water and heard Evan's voice in the living room. Babe, just a few more months and she'll move into that assisted living place. I'll turn her room into your walk-in closet. Lydia laughed. No, she suspects nothing. She's so naive, still thinks her daughter loves her. I froze on the staircase, gripping the railing so I wouldn't collapse. We've already spent most of the money from selling her little house, Evan continued. But don't worry, once she's gone, we'll sell this one. Buy a smaller place in Westlake and still have plenty left. Lydia, she just does whatever you say. Weak people are easy to control. I went back to my room and cried until my pillow was soaked. Still, I did nothing. Because deep down, I kept hoping Lydia would realize, would stand up for her mother. Foolish me. The months that followed were pure humiliation. Evan treated me like hired help. Mother-in-law, since you're not teaching anymore, let me focus on my career. You can take care of the house. Fair trade. So I cleaned, cooked, did laundry, babysat, and made lunch for 8 people every Sunday when his family came over. In return, I had a roof over my head, a tiny room, and the illusion that I was still part of the family. Maggie, reheat Sophie's lunch. Maggie, iron my shirts. Maggie, bathe Max. I need to go out. Never a single please or thank you. Lydia just sat there, pretending not to notice. One afternoon, Sophie, my 8-year-old granddaughter, brought home a drawing of her family. Her dad, her mom, her little brother, and a small figure in the corner. Who's this? I asked. That's me, right? The teacher said to draw our family, she said. But Mom said you're not really part of it. You're just staying here for now. Her words cut straight through my chest. And what do you think, sweetheart? I asked softly. She smiled innocently. I think you are family. You make chocolate cake every Friday. It was the sweetest and most painful thing I'd ever heard. Sitting now on the penthouse balcony, I could remember every humiliation, every tear I swallowed. And then I realized something inside me had changed. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. For 3 years, I had accepted crumbs of affection, erased myself just to stay, slowly disappearing under the fear of being thrown out. And in the end, they still threw me out. Because to someone like Evan, I would never be enough, just a burden to get rid of. And Lydia, my daughter, had chosen her side long ago. I had simply been blind, clinging to the memory of the little girl she once was, refusing to see the weak woman she had become. I picked up my phone. 213 missed calls, messages still coming. Mom, please answer. Mom, we need to talk. I didn't mean what I said, didn't mean it, but they said it. They shouted it. They threw me out like trash. I blocked their numbers. Charles knocked and came in carrying a breakfast tray, toast, butter, strawberry jam, and a glass of fresh orange juice. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Better than I have in 3 years," I replied. And it was true. He sat down across from me, studying my face carefully. "You look different today," he said. "I'm remembering," I replied slowly. "All the times I stayed silent when I should have spoken." Charles nodded, eyes full of understanding. "What are you planning to do now?" I looked at him, then out the window, at the skyline of Austin stretching into the distance, a city I had almost forgotten. "I'm going to do what I should have done long ago." "And what's that?" I smiled. Not the bitter kind I'd worn for years, but one of quiet resolve. "I'm going to remember who I am." "And when a woman remembers who she truly is," I said softly, "the people who underestimated her learn a lesson they'll never forget." 2 days later, Charles drove me to a large commercial tower in downtown Austin. The glass facade gleamed, security was tight, the air was thick with money and authority, the kind that only law firms and tall buildings seem to breathe. "Trust me," he said gently, squeezing my hand as we stepped into the elevator. 12th floor. A polished brass plaque read, "Fraser Legal Group, Corporate Law, Doctor." Alan Fraser was waiting for us in a wide conference room with walnut tables, leather chairs, and shelves lined with books that looked more decorative than read. But it wasn't the luxury that caught my eye. It was the green folder sitting neatly on the table. On its cover, typed in black letters, was a name, Robert Hollander. My heart stopped. "Mrs. Hollander, please have a seat," Fraser said, gesturing toward the chair across from him. I sat down, my knees nearly giving out. Charles took the seat beside me, his hand still holding mine. That touch was the only thing keeping me grounded. Fraser opened the folder, a stack of papers, stamped, signed, notarized. "Before we begin," he said, looking at me over his titanium glasses, "may I ask, were you aware that your late husband was the co-founder of Hollander Bennett Developments?" "I was," I answered. "Robert and Charles started the company together back in the 90s. And did you also know that when he passed away, his shares were supposed to be divided among his legal heirs?" "Yes, my daughter Lydia said everything belonged to them, or at least that's what they told me." Charles and Fraser exchanged a glance, the kind of look that always precedes bad news. "Mrs. Hollander," Fraser said, pulling out another folder, "your daughter and son-in-law lied to you." The world around me seemed to stop. "What do you mean?" I gasped. "Robert left a notarized will. 40% of the company's shares were to go to you, 40% to Lydia, and 20% to the Hollander Foundation Scholarship Fund he created." He slid a document across the table. "Here. It's dated, signed, and officially certified. It was drafted 3 months before his passing." My hands trembled as I picked it up. Robert's signature, bold and clear, beside my own name, 40%. But Lydia said their lawyer advised it was better for everything to be under their names, since I didn't understand business. She said I signed a power of attorney. "You signed to let them manage it," Fraser corrected firmly. "Not to let them steal it. Those are 2 very different things. You are still the legal owner of 40%. My head spun. Too much information, too much anger, too much betrayal. Charles's jaw tightened. "There's more," he said. 2 years ago, Evan sold the company's shares to an investment group. He forged your signature and kept the entire payment. My throat tightened. How much? Fraser flipped to another page. The company was valued at approximately $5,100,000. Your 40% equals $2,040,000. With interest, revaluation, and emotional damages, the total claim now stands at roughly $2,700,000. $2.7 million. While I was being thrown out of my own home, sleeping in a cramped room, humiliated daily, Lydia and Evan were sitting on a fortune. I want to sue, I said, my voice steady. I want every penny back, plus interest, penalties, and justice. Fraser smiled, the knowing smile of a lawyer who already sees victory on the horizon. The lawsuit is ready, Mrs. Hollander. All it needs is your signature. I picked up the pen and signed 3 copies, each stroke of ink a declaration of war. Evan and Lydia will be notified within 48 hours, Fraser said. They'll have 15 days to respond, but with this evidence, forged signatures, bank records, original contracts, there's no way out. As we left the office, my head was spinning, but inside my chest was something new. Power. On the drive back, Charles stopped at a small cafe on Congress Avenue and ordered 2 espressos. He looked at me seriously. Maggie, are you sure? Suing your own daughter won't be easy. They'll fight back. Evan will keep poisoning her. And the children? I interrupted him. My grandchildren need to grow up knowing their grandmother wasn't someone to be stepped on. That self-respect isn't for sale. And that stealing from your own mother has consequences. Charles smiled, a flash of pride in his eyes. That's the Maggie I remember. That night, I turned off my phone, over 400 missed calls, and slept deeper than I had in years. No guilt, no fear, no regret. 2 days later, Charles's landline rang at 7 in the morning. It was Fraser. Summons delivered. Judging by their reaction, today might be the worst day of your daughter's life. I hung up and looked out the window. The sun was rising over Lake Austin. And me? I was just getting started. Lydia thought they were clever, that I would never find out. But they forgot one thing. I'm the daughter of German immigrants, and when Germans are betrayed, they take everything back. 3 weeks passed since the court issued the summons. 3 weeks of complete silence from me. 3 weeks that must have aged Lydia and Evan 10 years. I knew because Charles had hired a private investigator, not for revenge, but for strategy. Knowing your enemy is winning half the battle. And yes, my daughter had become my enemy. That Saturday morning, I decided it was time to look them in the eye. Not out of nostalgia, not for reconciliation, but because some conversations demand a face-to-face reckoning. I turned my phone back on after weeks of silence. Lydia answered instantly. Mom, thank God. We need to talk. This is a huge misunderstanding. I can explain. The Cedar Room, tonight, 8 o'clock, you and Evan. Don't be late. I hung up before she could respond. Charles, sitting back in his armchair with a cup of coffee, smiled softly. You're radiant when you're in control. I learned from the best, I said, winking at him. By 7:30, I was ready. I chose a knee-length black dress, the same one I'd worn to my last graduation ceremony before I retired from teaching, but never dared to wear again. Low heels, hair loose over my shoulders, silver strands catching the light, a touch of deep red lipstick. When I walked downstairs, Charles stood up, eyes wide. Maggie, you look stunning. I smiled. Revenge is best served cold, but there's no rule saying you can't look beautiful while serving it. We arrived at the Cedar Room exactly at 8. An elegant restaurant, crystal chandeliers, white linens, waiters in gloves. The kind of place where one dinner used to equal my weekly salary. Lydia and Evan were already seated in the corner, both looking uneasy. When they saw me, their faces changed. Lydia went pale. Evan's eyes widened. I was no longer the woman in the floral dress, hands wet from washing dishes. I was myself again. The woman they had forgotten ever existed. I walked toward them, feeling every gaze in the room follow me. Maybe it was in my head, but I felt like a queen. Mom! Lydia blurted out, standing, trying to hug me. I stepped aside and took the seat across from them, crossing my legs, signaling the waiter. "A glass of Cabernet, please. Thank you." The air grew tense. Evan fiddled with his napkin. Lydia looked around, avoiding my eyes. "You both look polished," I said lightly. "Evan, new Armani suit? And you, Lydia. Those are pearl earrings, aren't they? Lovely." Lydia swallowed hard. "Mom, about the lawsuit." "Oh, the lawsuit," I interrupted, smiling. "Yes, we should talk about that." I opened my purse, took out a brown envelope, and placed it in the center of the table. "I want you both to see this." Evan stared at it as if it were a ticking bomb. "What is it?" he asked, voice trembling. "Open it," I said, "and find out." Evan tore open the envelope with trembling hands. The color drained from his face. Inside were copies of forged documents, my falsified signature, and bank statements showing that $2,040,000 had been transferred into his account 2 years earlier. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "Your father was a meticulous man, Evan," I said evenly. "He kept copies of everything in the safe at Lakeview House. When he passed, he left me the key. I just never imagined I'd have to use it against my own daughter and her husband." A lie. But they didn't need to know that. "Mom, I can explain." "Then go ahead," I said, my voice cold as glass. "Explain why you forged my signature, why you stole nearly $2 million from me, why you let me sleep in a storage room while you spent my money on Swiss watches, champagne dinners, and luxury vacations." The waiter arrived with my wine. I took a slow sip. The bitterness lingered on my tongue, sweeter than anything I'd ever tasted. Lydia tried to steady herself. "Mom, we didn't mean—" "Stop talking," I cut her off, my eyes sharp enough to make her flinch. "You don't get to speak. You're the one who took my grandmother's jewelry, turned me into a servant in my own home, and plotted to shove me into a retirement facility so you could turn my room into your closet." Lydia's face went pale. "How did you—" "The walls have ears, and you talk too loudly on the phone." Evan buried his face in his hands. "Mom, it was all my fault. Lydia had nothing to do with it." "Good," I said, leaning forward. "Then admit it. Admit you stole from me. Admit you threw me out of my own house. Admit you screamed at your mother like an animal." Tears streamed down his face, but I felt no sympathy. "I don't even recognize what you've become, Evan. The boy I once taught to write, the one who helped me mend fences. He's gone. All that's left is a coward who chose money over his mother." "Mom, I'm sorry." I laughed, dry, hollow, final. "You're only sorry because you got caught, because now you'll have to pay back every penny, with interest, penalties, and public humiliation." I stood, clutching my handbag. How ironic. I once sold my little cottage in Wimberley to invest in you, $300,000. And while I lived in a box of a room, you sat on nearly $2 million of my money. The company was struggling, Mom. I needed the funds. Needed them? My voice rose. A few heads turned, but I didn't care. Needed them to buy new cars? To vacation in Cancun? To wear Versace while your mother washed your laundry and slept in a room without a window? Silence fell heavy and suffocating. Lydia's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't of regret. They were rage. "Your lawyer can speak with mine," I said, stepping back from the table. "Either you return what's mine peacefully, or the court will make you. And trust me, that will hurt far more." "Mom, wait!" I turned one last time. "One more thing, Evan. When I die, and it won't be any time soon because now I have a reason to live longer, don't come to my funeral. Don't shed crocodile tears. Don't pretend to be a devoted son. You had your chance. You threw it away." I walked out of the restaurant with my head held high. Charles's driver was waiting outside. I got into the car and exhaled deeply. Only when the vehicle began to move did my body start to tremble, and a single tear slid down my cheek. Not from sadness, but from release. Because finally, after all these years, I had said everything. But that dinner was only the beginning. Because once Lydia realized she was about to lose everything, her mask began to crack. The trap she set next nearly destroyed me, And believe me, the worst was yet to come. After that evening, I thought I could finally breathe, that the darkest days were behind me, that all I had left to do was wait for justice. I was wrong. A week later, Charles walked into my room with an expression I had never seen on his face before, a mixture of anger and disgust. "Maggie, we need to talk." The tone of his voice made my stomach tighten. That tone never brings good news. He sat on the edge of my bed, holding a brown envelope, avoiding my eyes. "The private investigator I hired to monitor the case found something." He paused. "It's about Lydia." "What now?" I asked quietly. He opened the envelope. Inside were photos. Lydia entering a hotel, leaving an apartment, and several shots of her kissing a man who was definitely not Evan. Younger, muscular, shaved head, the type who lives at the gym, not at home. "Who is he?" I asked, though deep down, I already knew. "Ethan Cole, 32, fitness trainer at a downtown gym," Charles said, flipping through the images. "They've been seeing each other for at least a year, 2 to 3 times a week, always at the same hotel off the highway." A strange wave of satisfaction rose in me. So the perfect wife had her own dirty secrets. "Anything else?" I asked. Charles nodded, pulling out a few bank statements. "Remember your grandmother's jewelry, the ones that vanished? They were sold at a jewelry boutique downtown, $23,000. The money was deposited into a joint account Lydia secretly opened with this man." I froze. $23,000. My grandmother's heirlooms, priceless family history, sold to fund her affair. "And this," he said, handing me another document. "Plane tickets to Cancun. Booked last year under the names Lydia Hollander and Ethan Cole. A 7-day stay at a 5-star resort, paid for with a credit card linked to Evan's account." It was all true. The so-called girls' getaway she'd lied about was actually a honeymoon with her lover, funded by money stolen from me. "Does Evan know?" I asked. Charles sighed. "He does. The investigator found old messages. Evan discovered it 6 months ago. Lydia cried, begged for forgiveness, promised to end it, and he forgave her." "Forgave her?" I couldn't believe it. "He's afraid of her," Charles said quietly. "Afraid of divorce, afraid of losing the kids, afraid of being alone. So he chose to pretend he didn't know." I walked to the window, looking down at the traffic on Riverside Drive. My son, the man who had stolen from me, was too weak to throw out the woman who betrayed him. "Give everything to Frazier," I said coldly. "This changes the entire case." Charles frowned. "What do you mean?" "Lydia manipulated my son," I said flatly. "She used him to access family assets, sold my mother's jewelry to fund her affair. That's not infidelity, Charles. That's fraud. And I want her in prison." Charles gave a cold, deliberate smile. "I'm already working on that." 2 days later, I rang the bell of the house that used to be mine in Westlake Hills. Lydia opened the door, forcing a thin smile. In her eyes, hatred flickered beneath the fear. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want to speak with Evan. Alone." She started to protest, but Evan appeared behind her, gaunt, sleepless, eyes dark and hollow. "Let her in, Lydia." I stepped inside, hit by a wave of strange familiarity. Everything looked the same. The furniture, the framed photos, the faint scent of jasmine. But it wasn't home anymore. Evan led me into his office and closed the door. We stared at each other in silence. He looked weak, broken, 10 years older than when I'd last seen him. "I know about Lydia and Ethan Cole," I said plainly. He froze. His lips parted, then shut again without a sound. "I know she cheated on you. I know you found out and said nothing. I know she sold Grandma Clarice's jewelry to pay for her little vacation with her lover." I stepped closer. "And I know one more thing. You're a coward." "Mom, it's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple," I shouted. "She manipulated you, used you, betrayed you, and you still chose to throw me out instead of her." Evan broke down, sobbing. "I was scared, Mom, scared of losing her, scared of being alone, scared of living without her." In that moment, I understood. My son wasn't just weak, he was trapped. Lydia had hollowed him out, turned him into a puppet. Part of me pitied him, but the part of me that had been deeply, irreparably wounded could not forgive. "Evan, look at me." I held his face in my hands, forcing him to meet my eyes. "You have to choose. Either you wake up and realize she's destroying your life, or you'll lose everything. The company, the money, the kids, and me." He cried harder. "I don't want to lose you, Mom." "Then do something. Prove it." I stepped back. "Because if you keep living like this, you're already gone." I turned and walked out. Lydia was standing in the living room, her face pale, clearly having heard everything. I passed her without looking, but stopped at the door. "Oh, Lydia," I said coolly, "I hope you enjoyed those trips to Cancun, because your next one will be to prison." Her face went white as marble, and I walked out, filled with a power I hadn't felt in years. That evening, Fraser called. "Maggie, we have a problem." My stomach tightened. "What kind of problem?" "Lydia just filed a restraining order against you. She claims you threatened her life, in front of a witness." I froze. "She also filed to restrict your contact with your grandchildren, saying your presence is psychologically harmful to them." The world seemed to crumble around me. "No, that's impossible." "It's possible," Fraser said grimly. "And she's done it. The hearing's next week." The phone slipped from my hand. My fingers trembled. Lydia had gone low, viciously low. And for the first time since leaving that house, I felt genuine fear. Fear of losing Becca and Eli. Fear of never seeing them again. Fear that the venomous woman might actually win. But she forgot one thing. You never go after a German grandmother's grandchildren, because every poison has an antidote. And what I did next changed everything. That week was the worst since it all began. Worse than the day I was thrown out. I could endure humiliation, betrayal, loss. But being cut off from my grandchildren was the line no one crosses. For 3 sleepless nights, I sat on the balcony, watching Austin's city lights shimmer, thinking of Becca and Eli, their gummy smiles, their tiny hands. Becca loved baking cookies every Friday afternoon. Eli always begged for one more batch of chocolate chip. All of that could be stolen from me with a single lie. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in a navy blue suit, hair pinned neatly, makeup light. I looked like the calm, dignified woman I truly was, not the dangerous grandmother Lydia had described. Fraser picked me up at 8 that morning. In the car, he went over the plan again. "Stay calm, Maggie. Don't react to provocation. Let me handle the speaking." He glanced at me, his tone firm. "And be prepared. Lydia will lie. A lot." The courthouse was an old building on Congress Avenue, filled with the smell of paper, wood, and age. The narrow hallway buzzed with murmuring attorneys in dark suits. At the far end stood Lydia, light blue dress, soft makeup, hair pinned neatly up, no jewelry. She looked every inch the perfect mother. Evan stood beside her, head down, too ashamed to look at me. The hearing room was small and airless. The judge, a woman in her 50s with short hair and glasses, read the file in a dry, measured voice. "Restraining order hearing, case number 14382. My heart pounded in my chest. Lydia's lawyer, a heavy-set man in a rumpled suit, rose from his chair. "Your Honor, my client has lived in fear ever since Mrs. Maggie Lane threatened her life." He flipped open a folder. "There is a witness who confirms the defendant said, and I quote, 'Your next trip will be to prison.' That is a direct threat." The judge looked up at me over her glasses. "Do you admit you said those words, Mrs. Lane?" Fraser stood. "Your Honor, context is important." "I'm asking the defendant," she interrupted. I took a slow breath. "Yes, I said it. But it wasn't a threat. It was a legal statement. She sold family property to fund her affair. That's a crime." My voice stayed calm. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Lydia flushed crimson. "Liar!" she shouted, jumping to her feet. "She's making this up to ruin me." "Order!" The judge banged the gavel. "Ms. Lydia, sit down. Only I ask the questions here." Her lawyer continued smoothly. "Beyond the threat, there are also child welfare concerns. Two minors, Eli, age 8, and Becca, age 5, are living in emotional distress. Mrs. Lane frequently visits unannounced, accuses their mother, and causes psychological harm. "I visited once this month," I blurted out before I could stop myself. The judge lifted her hand. "Mrs. Lane, silence." She turned back to the lawyer. "Continue." "Eli has nightmares," he said dramatically. "He told his teacher that his mom and grandmother always fight, and he's afraid of losing them both. Becca has started wetting the bed again, something she hadn't done in 2 years. Therefore, we request that the court prohibit Mrs. Lane from any contact with the children until further evaluation." It felt like my soul was being pulled out of my body. No contact with my grandchildren, no hugs, no Friday cookie sessions. Tears spilled uncontrollably down my cheeks. Fraser stood immediately. "Your Honor, this is blatant manipulation. The petitioner is using the children as leverage in a multi-million-dollar property dispute. We have documented proof that Lydia embezzled funds, sold heirlooms, and used the proceeds to finance her affair." "That is outside the scope of this hearing," the judge said sharply. "We are here only to address the restraining order." "But, Your Honor, it's all connected." "I understand, Counselor." She flipped through the file in silence, the ticking of the wall clock the only sound in the room. Then she spoke quietly. "The court grants the petition in part." My world collapsed in that instant. "The court hereby restricts Mrs. Maggie Lane from entering or approaching the family residence," the judge continued. I held my breath until she added, "However, visitation rights with her grandchildren will remain, provided meetings occur at a neutral location, under supervision, once a week." And it wasn't the outcome I hoped for, but it wasn't the worst either. Lydia, on the other hand, smiled in triumph. Even taking a fraction of my freedom was victory enough for her. When I stepped out of the courthouse, I felt drained. Charles was waiting outside, and as soon as he saw me, he rushed forward and pulled me into his arms. Right there on the dusty sidewalk of that old courthouse, I broke down completely. I cried harder than I had on the day my husband died. I cried for the injustice, for the cruelty, for the sight of my son sitting silently in that courtroom while his wife dismantled his own mother's life. "She won," I sobbed. "She actually did it. She cut me off from my grandchildren." Charles tightened his embrace and whispered, "She hasn't won, Maggie. This was just one battle. The real war is still ahead." That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't speak. I sat on the balcony, staring into the black expanse over Lake Austin. Charles tried everything: hot tea, warm blankets, soft jazz. Nothing helped. Near midnight, he sat beside me and placed his hand over mine. "Maggie, look at me." I turned to him, my eyes swollen from crying. "That woman," he said slowly, "has no idea who she's dealing with. She underestimated you. She thinks you'll bow your head." He leaned closer, his voice calm but edged with fire. "But she forgot one thing." "What's that?" I whispered. Charles smiled. "Because you are the strongest woman I've ever known. You raised a child on your own, worked for decades, lost your husband, and still stood tall. This won't break you, Maggie." His words lit a small fire inside me. "What do you want me to do?" I asked quietly. Charles stood, disappeared into his study, and returned with a thick green folder. "I want us to stop playing defense," he said, "and start fighting back." I opened it. Inside were spreadsheets, contracts, and financial statements, organized, clipped, and ready. "Evan's company is on the brink of collapse," Charles explained. "Bad management, reckless spending, poor investments. In 6 months, he'll be over $500,000 in debt." I looked up. "How do you know that?" He gave a faint smile. "Because I quietly bought every one of those debts through intermediary firms. I'm his largest creditor now. I can pull the plug on his company whenever I want." It took a moment for the meaning to sink in. He'd done all of this. For me. Charles held my gaze. "I did it because Evan deserves consequences. And because now, you get to decide his future." I looked down at the sea of red numbers. For the first time in days, I smiled. Lydia might play dirty, but she forgot one thing. Southern women know how to fight, and when they fight back, they win. The next morning, I woke up clear-headed. Not angry, strategic. I brewed coffee, sat by the window, and reread the file. Lane Design Group was drowning. Overdue taxes, unpaid wages, supplier lawsuits, a financial graveyard. Through his shell companies, Charles controlled more than $520,000 of that debt. But buried among the numbers, something didn't feel right. I called Fraser. I need a forensic accountant, the best you have. For what? I want every dollar of my son's company traced, every invoice, every transfer, every expense from the last 3 years. What exactly are you looking for, Maggie? Evidence, I said slowly. Evidence of who really destroyed him. Fraser understood immediately. You'll have a report in a week. While waiting, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator specializing in child welfare. I want to know how my grandchildren are living, I told him. Observe their routines, meals, school attendance. I suspect Lydia is neglecting them. He nodded. You'll have a report in 10 days. Exactly a week later, Fraser arrived at my house with a thick binder. His face was serious, but his eyes gleamed. Sit down, Maggie. You need to see this. He opened the file. Pages of spreadsheets, yellow notes, dense graphs. Your son isn't a thief, he said. Evan's just incompetent. Bad investments, wrong people. Someone's been siphoning his money. Systematically. I held my breath. Lydia, right? He nodded. In the past 3 years, over $340,000 has vanished from the company accounts. Unauthorized transfers, fake vendors, ghost payments. He flipped another page. All trails lead to 3 places: a joint account under Lydia and Ethan Cole, an investment under her mother's name, and a secret apartment deeded to Lydia herself. I clenched my fists, half fury, half relief. Finally, proof. There's more, Fraser said, handing me another stack. Your mother's jewelry wasn't sold for $23,000 as Lydia claimed. It sold for $58,000. She pocketed the difference through a fake appraisal deal with the jeweler, her cousin. I trembled. Equal parts rage and grim satisfaction. At last, the truth. What do we do now? I asked. Fraser's smile turned sharp. Now, we destroy her. The next day, the investigator's report arrived. Eli had missed 3 days of school because his mother forgot to drive him. Lunch was mostly fast food. Becca had started wetting the bed again, not from fear of me, but because Lydia screamed through the nights and left them alone with the television. There were photos, videos. Eli waiting by the school gate at 5 p.m. No one came. Becca crying on the playground, her hands sunburned. It was irrefutable. I held the stack of pictures, my hands trembling. My grandchildren, I whispered. Is it enough? I asked Fraser, handing over the entire dossier. Financial fraud, child neglect, solid evidence. He flipped through the pages, then looked up with a broad grin. Maggie, you don't just have enough. He tapped the file. You have an arsenal. But one thing still tore at me. Evan. Weak, manipulated, but still my son. Part of me wanted revenge. Another part wanted to save him. That night, Charles and I sat on the balcony overlooking Lake Austin. I could destroy them both, I said softly. I have enough to send Lydia to prison, claim custody of the kids, and bankrupt Evan. I lowered my head. But he's still my son. Charles took my hand. So what will you do? I drew a deep breath. I'll give him one last chance. Just one, but on my terms. I turned to him. I'll offer a deal. I'll erase the $520,000 debt if he does 3 things. Divorces Lydia immediately, enters therapy with me and the children, and repays the full $40,000 inheritance money he stole. Installments allowed. If he refuses, my voice turned to steel, then it's over. Lydia goes to prison. Evan loses everything. And I take custody of Eli and Becca. Charles looked at me with open admiration. Maggie, you're not just strong. You're extraordinary. The next morning, Fraser drafted the contract. Terms, witnesses, notary, everything airtight. This would be Evan's final chance to prove he still had a soul. The meeting was set for Tuesday at Fraser's office. Neutral ground, with attorneys, a therapist, and 2 court witnesses present. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing a light gray dress, hair neatly pinned, no jewelry. I wanted to look like myself, composed, steady, unshakable. Charles sat beside me. Fraser reviewed the documents. Paul, the forensic accountant, prepared his laptop, and the 2 court witnesses took their places. At exactly 10 a.m., the door opened. Evan walked in first. His suit hung loose, his beard untrimmed, deep circles carved under his eyes. He looked like a man who had already lost everything. Lydia followed behind. Tight red dress, high heels, makeup thick enough to hide the panic beneath. The arrogance she once wore like perfume was gone, replaced by fear. Their lawyer, the same overweight man in the wrinkled suit, came in last, clutching his briefcase like a shield. "Good morning," Fraser began, his voice cool and precise. "Thank you all for coming. Today's meeting is for reconciliation, but it will be recorded and may be used in court." Lydia opened her mouth to object, but her lawyer pressed a hand on the table. "Go ahead, Mr. Fraser." Fraser turned on the projector. Charts and spreadsheets flickered to life on the wall. "Let's get straight to it," he said. "In the past 3 years, over $340,000 has disappeared from Lane Design Group." He pointed at the red numbers. Unauthorized transfers, fraudulent invoices, illegal payments. Evan's eyes widened. He turned toward Lydia. She had gone pale. "What? What is this?" he stammered. "Lies! It's all lies!" Lydia screamed. Paul, the forensic accountant, stood calmly. "Nothing here is fabricated, ma'am. All data was extracted directly from your accounting software and cross-checked with bank statements." He clicked the next slide. A line item appeared in bold letters. Transfer, $53,000 to joint account under Lydia Harrington Marlowe and Ethan Cole. The lover's name hit the room like a bullet. Evan shot to his feet, face ashen. "Ethan, you put his name on your account?" "Evan, let me explain." "Explain what?" I said, my voice sharp as glass, as Paul moved to the next slide. "Property purchase," he read. 2-bedroom Lakeview condo in Miami. Purchase price, $280,000. The room went dead silent. Evan staggered, gripping the edge of the table for balance. "You bought a house with him? With my money?" Lydia was cornered. Her eyes darted, searching for a way out that didn't exist. "And there's more," I said quietly, each word cutting through the air like a knife. Fraser switched to another slide. Photos of Eli and Becca filled the screen. Eli sitting alone at the school gate, Becca's sunburned arms, teacher notes about missed classes and skipped meals. "While you were busy with your lover and counting stolen money," I said, "these children were being neglected." The family therapist opened her folder. "I spoke with the principal," she said softly. "Eli shows signs of aggression. Becca is regressing emotionally." Evan slumped forward, covering his face. "I didn't know. Oh, God, I didn't know." "Because you never looked, Evan," I snapped, my composure cracking for the first time. "You were too busy serving her to see what she was destroying. Your company, your children, and your mother." Lydia shot to her feet, pointing at me. "You're just a bitter old woman. You can't stand that your son built a life without you." I rose too. "You call betrayal, fraud, and child neglect a life? You're a liar, a thief, and a terrible mother. Enough!" Fraser slammed his palm on the table. "Both of you, sit down!" I took a deep breath, steadied myself. Lydia trembled, lips pressed tight. Her lawyer leaned close, whispering, "Sit. You're making it worse." She sat, eyes still blazing. Fraser opened the final folder. "Evan," he said evenly, "now it's your turn." He slid a document across the table. "Your company owes $520,000. Those debts have been purchased by Mr. Charles Bennett through intermediary firms. He has full legal authority to file bankruptcy proceedings at any time." Evan looked at Charles, then at me. Shock and fear flickered in his eyes. Fraser continued, "However, there's an offer on the table. Your mother is willing to forgive the entire debt if you agree to 3 conditions." I slid the contract toward him. Evan read aloud, voice shaking. "First, divorce Lydia immediately. Second, participate in family therapy for a minimum of 1 year. Third, repay $40,000 in inheritance funds within 10 years, interest-free. The room fell completely silent. I met his eyes. If you agree, I said evenly, I'll help you rebuild. Your company can recover. You can reclaim your place and become the father your children deserve. And if I refuse, he whispered. If you refuse, I said, my voice firm and unshaking, then I'll end this completely. Lydia will be prosecuted for fraud and embezzlement. You'll go bankrupt, and I'll fight for custody of Eli and Becca because both of you have already proven you're unfit to be parents. Lydia screamed, Don't you dare sign, Evan. Don't you dare. She's bluffing. She's just trying to scare you. Fraser slid another folder across the table toward her. This, he said calmly, is the official complaint already filed. Fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. What about your mom? Evan asked gently. She's on another page, Becca said innocently, because she lives far away now. Children have their own way of understanding things, simple yet so profound. Across the table, Charles looked at me and smiled. I smiled back, my heart full. When everyone left and Evan took the kids to the lakeside park, Charles and I sat again on the balcony. He reached for my hand. Maggie, he said quietly, you did it. You rebuilt everything. We did it, I said. I couldn't have done it alone. Yes, you could have, he smiled. You're the strongest woman I've ever known. I rested my head on his shoulder, watching the sun paint gold across the rooftops along the river. You know what I've learned from all this? I asked softly. What's that? That we don't have to live with broken pieces, that self-respect is never for sale, and that even when life shatters us into 1,000 fragments, we can still rebuild ourselves.